What's going on, everyone? So today, planetary qualifiers are in full swing, and we've gotten a few results as of a few hours ago from planetary qualifiers outside of the states, and I want to go over a few of those results today, as well as let you all know we're going to be doing a full breakdown on Monday, as well as probably reviewing it on Sunday, because these are the very first planetary qualifiers realistically from set 3. There was one, I believe, planetary qualifier in the midst of the early weeks because it was stalled from set 2, but that doesn't really give us a good representation because we didn't get to see a lot of the meta develop and really see a lot of the leaders flushed out. But if you want to keep up to date with this stuff and you don't want to rely on me or anyone else or anything like that, I recommend checking out Star Wars Unlimited Competitive Hub. This is honestly just the best site for any sort of tournament results, meta breakdowns, and things like that. And they've actually added a new tab on the homepage called the Meta and PQ Set 3. And it gives you a complete breakdown of all the data that has been taken into account, as well as a top 8 breakdown, a leader/winner breakdown, as well as a little bit of metadata for that, which is really awesome. And I want to dive into this specifically today. A big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. I saw a lot of you chatting about the planetary qualifiers, checking them out, and watching a few of the tournaments going on, as well as I have been. It's been a lot of fun, and a lot of interesting stuff have been flowing in. But for now, we've got PQ Bologna, PQ, I'm going to butcher some of these names, Barcelona, got that one, PQ Toulouse. Someone's got to tell me like the phonetic pronunciation in the comment section down below. I'm obviously butchering it, but anyways, we had 3 planetary qualifiers so far in set 3, and these are the top 8 breakdowns. Now, PQ Bologna was the one, I believe, that took place a while ago. If we jump back to the tournament results and we look, these 2 are the ones that took place today, January 4th, and the Bologna one was a while back as a representation of a late start from set 2 into set 3. So we had a little bit of a different kind of, I guess you'd say, show up of meta versus what we were seeing now. These 2 are the actual top 8s from the ones today. And as you can see from this, we've got a Kira Green taking first place and a Sabine ECL taking first place. So Sabine Green, Kira Green, both of these decks were the decks that I spoke about in my top meta decks video. Alongside that, what did I put in there? Django Red, which we had 2 showings from the Barcelona PQ in the top 8, as well as Cad Bane Red, 2 showings in the this PQ, the French PQ, as well as I spoke about Bosque Blue, Han Yellow, which we saw 2 Han Yellows in the top 8 over here, none in the Barcelona one, Bosque Blue, and we saw a bunch of other kind of random throw-ins in the midst of them. We saw Django Blue, which was very interesting. I'd be very curious to see this type of list. Is it very similar to the Bosque Blue list that we were seeing from set 2 that was actually doing very well at the end of set 2 planetary qualifier meta? A Cassian Yellow deck, which honestly, I am not surprised. One thing that has really impressed me is Cunning Heroism. Cunning Heroism, at least in my opinion, has gotten one of the biggest buffs from set 2. Set 2, one of the only decks that was really running Cunning Heroism. Occasionally Yellow Sabine, which just felt like a worse version of Sabine Green, as well as Han Yellow. Those were the 2 decks that were really running it. And honestly, I think Han Yellow was really the only one to really worry about. Cassian Yellow, and more specifically, Cunning Heroism with Plo Koons. Oh my gosh, has that archetype and that kind of direction just gotten so significantly better, which is one of the reasons why Han Yellow still is a contender. In the other PQ from France, we had a Boss Green coming in second. Pretty sweet there. No ECL, just Boss Green. We've got a basically standardized meta here besides the Boss Green. In the other planetary qualifier, we had Palpatine Green as well showing up. So we had Django Blue, Palpatine Green, Cassian Yellow, and Boss Green as a little bit of the outliers. Honestly, all of these decks besides Cassian Yellow would have been in the top spots of some of the decks that I would be rating. Cassian yellow, there's not much to be said about Cassian specifically, but if we pop back over to the homepage and we pull up the meta from Planetary Qualifiers and we check out the breakdown, it looks like we have a deck list from Cassian. And I took a peek at this earlier, and my goodness, is this a pretty sweet deck to look at. It is the full-on space aggressive nature of heroism, aggression, cunning, and you don't even care about the ground. The only ground unit we're playing besides Cassian is K2. And this makes a lot of sense because K2 provides someone to, or provides like a little bit of a threat that you kind of have to deal with. And even if it gets killed or they spend resources to kill it, it deals 3 damage to their base, right? Which is really, really nice. Outside of that, we got a bunch of space units, just a bunch of space units, and a bunch of events to, in some cases, get direct damage in, like Chaos of War, Daring Raid, and, well, in this case, we're not playing, actually, 4 cards I believe in, which is a little bit surprising, but it does make sense because we're playing 3 of Breaking In, 3 of Surprise Strike, 3 of Outmaneuver, 3 of Armed to the Teeth, and 2 of Waylay. Outmaneuver, very interesting in this deck because we have all space units, so it's basically gonna not impact us at all. I've been really enjoying the 3 of Breaking Ins and Surprise Strikes. Just using this as essentially +2 damage to your opponent's base is just really excellent. And the same thing with Surprise Strike, using this as +3 damage to your opponent's base is really sweet. One of the cards that I think is really cool in this edition and is different, space decks, pretty standard, very minimal ground units, pretty standard, lots of events, pretty standard. Armed to the Teeth, on the other hand, is not something that we've seen. And I really like this addition to the deck. This does not have a restriction to not be played on a vehicle unit, as we see with a lot of upgrades. For example, Hotshot Blaster requires you to have non-vehicle units, and it's usually the go-to. Armed to the Teeth actually ends up being way stronger if you're able to go ahead and get the attack in and buff up your other unit. And in a deck with all space units, it is a lot more likely for your opponent to not be able to interact with them as much. And especially in a Cunning Heroism shell, where you have things like Millennium Falcon, which can come down and immediately attack and immediately get impact on the board. For example, if you go something like turn 1, play a unit, turn 2, play a unit, and then turn 3, play a unit, and then turn 4, you go like Armed to the Teeth plus Millennium Falcon. They might have dealt with a couple of your early units, but now you can get a essentially immediately readied up, immediately ready to be upgraded by Armed to the Teeth, and immediately ready to attack to get the value of Armed to the Teeth is front side, which is the +2/+0, and the on attack trigger because you have another unit to attack with, which is really, really awesome. So I absolutely love seeing that. Alongside that, as I mentioned, we did see a Django Blue here, which we don't quite have a deck list for, which is a little bit unfortunate. The Boss Green that we saw, well, a little bit of an interesting one. We don't have a deck list from the most recent Planetary Qualifier today. We had some in the past. And for the, where was it? Palpatine Green. Where are you, my friend? Palpatine Green coming down here. We did not have the deck list for the Planetary Qualifier today, so we'll have to wait on those. But another interesting thing to note is we are seeing an even 50-50 split between Tarkentown and ECL in terms of just non-standardized bases. No other unique bases being used. There are some 30 HP bases being used, and in total, as you see here, it's 29.17% of the meta being Tarkentown, and another 29.17% of the meta being ECL, and then the remainder, roughly like 42% being 30 HP bases. Well, we've got a pretty big showing from Tarkentown, and mainly that's because of things like Django Red and Cad Bane Red. Pretty much, there is Ray Red that oftentimes uses Tarkentown, and there is also Palpatine, set 3 Palpatine that used Tarkentown, but both of those not nearly as potent as the Cad Banes and the Djangos typically. Another thing to note is we are seeing a still pretty big dominance from Spark of Rebellion, mainly because of Sabine. Sabine being 7 of the top 8 spots just really puts Spark of Rebellion in terms of, okay, this is the strongest leader, or these are the strongest leaders at the top. Again, it's all Sabine. It's basically all Sabine. If you were to take this and say, okay, mix this up with a bunch of different aggro leaders, it would look a lot different. but 7 of the top 12 or 12 of the top 8s, and 7 of those 12 being Sabine is a pretty big showing from set 1. Twilight of the Republic, what do you have for us? Literally just Django and the Palp. But Palp was from the earlier event. It actually was not from this planetary qualifier, if I remember correctly, from the results that we've seen today. As you all see, we saw the Cassian, we saw the Django blue, we saw the Palp green, and we saw the boss green, which was not the new Palp red deck that was all space. A little bit of an interesting idea from the earlier planetary qualifier in set 3. So a little bit interesting there, but not surprised that we're not seeing something like Palp coming into play here, new Palp that is, because he's a little bit of a hit or miss. One thing that was a little bit surprising, for those of you that were watching some of the tournaments, Django Red really struggled a lot more than I think a lot of people expected. And I am not like super surprised about this. To me, after getting involved in set 3 a lot more, as I had mentioned in my video from the top meta decks, Cad Bane and Django are kind of two sides of the same coin. Cad Bane is like the now there are two of them style with more ground focus, and then Django is a triple dark raid space version with the space focus, and both of which are pretty strong, but Django requires just a little bit more timing and a little bit more finesse with the choices that you make because of the ability to exhaust. I actually think Django is a tougher deck to play in general than a lot of decks on here. I think Han Yellow is probably the toughest deck to play just because of how many options, calculating your smuggle costs and what deck cards you could be drawing. Of course, the controlling decks could be a little bit tough as well, with like Kira and Bosk Blue and things like that. But Han Yellow is one of the toughest to play. And Django Red is up there with some of the controlling decks. Sabine Green is by far the easiest to pick up. And, well, perhaps that's part of the reason why we're seeing a lot more of Sabine. It could also mean that Sabine is just the deck that people had, and that's what they're bringing. Or it could just be that Sabine is truly the deck to beat. Like, it is number 1 on our list. And honestly, without knowing the full breakdown of what was represented in the entire tournament, as you can see from the top, there was an average attendance of 81 players, but 244 is the sample size of the planetary qualifiers right now. Without knowing which and how much of that 244 was Sabine versus Django versus Cad Bane, etc. Like maybe 60 players entered with Sabine Green and only 10 players entered with Django Red, and then we ended up getting a 20% conversion rate from Django Red into the top 8, whereas Sabine only got what is that, like a little bit over 10%, like 12% conversion rate. Maybe Django Red has a better conversion rate than Sabine. We don't know, but it is a little bit interesting to see Sabine so dominant compared to the rest. And I cannot wait to see more results later on today and tomorrow to kind of double down on this, because with this, we are also including, as I mentioned, 33% of these results are from an earlier planetary qualifier, which the meta has changed significantly since that point in terms of what people are enjoying playing. But even if I exclude that, we have 4 Sabine Greens out of the 16 top 8s from the planetary qualifiers today. And by far the biggest showing, right? Cad Bane with 2, Django with 2, half as many top 8s as Sabine Green. And mind you, Sabine Green is spread across 2 tournaments, whereas Django Red was in 1 and Cad Bane was only in the other. Again, maybe this is a representation of just people bringing different decks to different tournaments, and that's how it shaped up. But it is very interesting information to know. So definitely, as I mentioned earlier, if you are still deciding on what deck to bring to your planetary qualifier, as of right now, the decks that I mentioned in my video previously were kind of the decks that performed. Literally, the top 5 lists are all top 5 lists that I mentioned in my video. Sabine Green, Cad Bane Red, Bosk Blue, Han Yellow, and Django Red. The other deck that I mentioned was kind of that villainy, vigilance controlling archetype, and that's something that did show up as well. I mentioned Kira, I believe, in that video, if I'm not mistaken, although that one was a little bit harder to remember. But these top 5 were certainly the ones on the lookout for me personally. If I had my choice, I would definitely be leaning towards like a Bosk Blue or potentially a Han Yellow, just because I find Han Yellow to be a lot of fun, and I think Bosk Blue is actually really well positioned. If you're going up against these Tarkin Town decks, Bosk Blue really leverages the fact that they no longer have access to one of their biggest tempo advantages. On the other hand, sometimes when you get, now there are two of them from Cad Bane, it's going to be pretty tough. I do think that Cad Bane is a little bit tougher of a matchup because you get a little bit more value in your leader and you have those insane curve outs to watch out for. Whereas Django, while you do have to deal with triple dark raids and you do have to deal with a lot of space pressure, they're usually 2 toughness units, and that's a lot easier to deal with things like Perilous Position, Make an Opening, Daring Raid even, and you can even ping off them with Bosk, which can be pretty nice. So that would have been my choice, probably Bosk Blue, not just because I enjoy that kind of style, but also because I have the cards for it, which makes it easier as well. But that is going to be kind of the brief review that we have of the most recent Planetary qualifiers. Again, the ones outside of the states that have already finished off for today. We are getting a ton more information, as I mentioned earlier. If I just look here, we have one in Iowa, Wisconsin, Nebraska, North Dakota, Illinois, and Nevada, all ready to go and ready to bring in data. One of them being on YouTube. So again, I'll leave a link to this down below if you want to check it out. I believe it's still streaming right now, last time I checked. And then tomorrow we have a bunch more to talk about as well, which is just going to give us a ton more information. And if I know my flags well, we have obviously the States, Canada, Brazil. Is this Italy, and is that Germany? Oh my gosh, someone's gonna flame me for not knowing all my flags, huh? Nope. Oh, I got it. Okay, I feel better. Yep. Okay, we're good. Okay, so well, can't wait for those ones to come in tomorrow. I took a risk, guys. We went in with the flags, and yep, we got them down. Happy about that one. But anyways, thanks for watching. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below if you've been paying attention to the planetary qualifiers as of late. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all for the next one.